Right. Again, Proverbs, finishing out Proverbs 3, it'll be verses 27 through 35. It sets itself up very nicely, actually, because you'll notice as you look at the passage that several of those verses, the first 5 of them actually start, in my translation anyway, start with the words, do not. Pretty straightforward. We have 4 prohibitions in the first 4 verses. Do not do this, do not do this, do not do this. There's actually a do not in verse 31 as well, but it's more of a summary statement. It kind of rolls everything together of everything that's been described so far in the first 4. And then we have the reasons that we're not to do these things given in verses 32 to 35. What the Lord does, who He is, the rewards that He gives for avoiding wickedness, and the punishments that He will dish out for those who continue to persist in their unrighteousness. That's how it breaks down. We have 4 prohibitions, 4 do nots, a summary statement in verse 31, and then the reasons for it all in verses 32 to 35. We're going to discover, which is really kind of cool, I love this kind of parallelism, it's probably my favorite, a lot of antithetical parallelism in verses 32 to 35. It's like, God is this way toward this person, but He is this way toward this person. Positive, negative, opposite of each other, for strong emphasis, especially as some of the words are used. The word abomination comes out, which is a very strong word, and how God is completely in hatred towards that kind of activity, something that is absolutely contrary to His character. A very strong term, which we'll talk about a bit. But before we get into that, as it shows up in the latter section of the verses, let us go then to verse 27 to see how it is we ought to behave toward those around us. We're going to see that as a main theme. How we should behave toward those around us, those with whom we have contact, our neighbors. That word shows up. You need to know who a neighbor is. Well, we'll talk about that. Verse 27 first. If someone please read that.
Do not withhold good from those whom it is due when it is in your power to act.
Thank you, ma'am. To those whom it is due. That's a pretty good translation. Do not withhold good. All right, our first do not. Don't do this. Do not withhold, of course, keep from giving. Do not keep back good from those to whom it is due. Okay? Let's talk about what is good then. What are we talking about here? What falls under this category of the things that could be good that we would be tempted to withhold? Money. Sure.
Yeah, payment for services rendered.
Payment for services rendered. This is certainly something that is included in this category. If someone, think of it in terms of maybe an employer-employee relationship. If someone is working for you in whatever area it is, I don't care if it's a kid coming to mow your grass or break up leaves, or if it's a job that you are doing 40 hours a week or whatever else, there's good, the money that you pay someone for services rendered, that is appropriate and right to give. It's a requirement. Don't withhold it. It's due to them. They own it. They possess it, is a way to describe that. So don't hold it back. That's one thing. Money. What else?
Helping somebody, something they're doing, or just doing your own work for your employer.
In other words, because you are the employee and you have an obligation to serve your employer due to the contractual arrangement of whatever job you have, then it is good for you to do your job rightly. Yes, it is. An action taking place. Services that you're supposed to render because of contractual obligations. Yeah, that's right. That falls into this category. Sure it does. How about justice? Justice is good. It is always due, isn't it? Justice is due everybody. Whether it's something that is rendered in the court of law, or disciplining a child because he swatted his brother. Justice is due, and it ought to be rendered appropriately. All of these things. Don't withhold that good. Of course, as we affirm the goodness or the righteousness of this command, do not withhold this good, what is the implication that sets it up in the first place? We are commanded not to withhold this good because it's due, because it's right to do it. Back it up even farther than that, or further than that. One of those, further, farther. Back it up a little bit more. We are told not to withhold it because we have a tendency to withhold it. Right? What's the point of having a command if it's always obeyed? There wouldn't be a need to give the law. There wouldn't be a need to bring it to people's attention. Our tendency is to hold things back. Is it not?
If we include mercy and grace in what is good, then We owe it to them because we've received it.
Yes. And when you're talking about God, grace cannot be demanded of God because that's the definition of grace. It's favor that He shows in an unmerited or demerited fashion. But given that we're not Him, and He has shown such graciousness and mercy to us, then we really do have an obligation to show it to others. Because He is so freely given, then we ought to be like our Father and give freely. Yeah.
Also, I thought to do good for somebody. If you have, the ability to help somebody, then do good for them regardless.
Ah, that's the last part of the verse, is it not? Do this, do not withhold good. In other words, do good to those to whom it is due, those to whom we ought to do good. Why? Do it when it's in your power to do it. In other words, if you can't do it, you can't do it. So I think sometimes we see all the sorts of evil going on in the world, and mass slaughters and massive amounts of hunger going on, and we see this as being a horrible thing, and we ought to see it that way. And sometimes we feel guilty. I need to do something, but I can't. Well, what can you do? Well, I can do this. Well, then do that. No one's expecting you to be able to stop millions of hunger overnight. You can't do that. That's not in your power. You can pray. Perhaps you can give in certain situations to help with the power that God has allotted to you to do. But there's no need to feel guilt over something that we can't do. When it's in our power to do it, that's the command here, right? If it's beyond our power, don't feel guilty about it. That's very
Also
imperative.
the do thing.
Sorry?
It's also the do thing. It's not do. We don't have obligations to everyone in the whole entire world.
That's an important point, is it not? To those to whom it is due. Those who own it, those to whom we should be giving it. Are there cases, even with people that we interact with on a regular basis? Let's go to the small level again, our own little worlds here, if you will, our sphere of influence. Are there people to whom such things are not due? Good question. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, he says. Yes, we have nots. Who?
The sluggard.
The sluggard, as is talked about in Proverbs? Yeah. The sluggard, the guy who's lying around, sitting around, not doing things that he ought to be doing. He's hungry. Well, is he working? No. He's sitting on his rear end or lying on his bed, not doing anything to go out and work for it. Quite possibly.
Some people make good money doing it.
Sometimes they do. The sluggard.
Or the alcoholic who says, can you give me $1 or $10, and they're going to buy alcohol with it.
Yeah,
Whereas if you have a relative or a sister or a friend or a brother or her, and she needs it, and I have it, then I should give it to her, as opposed to giving it to the guy who's going to go get drunk with it.
And verse 28 picks up on that theme, actually, and builds on it. We'll read that to her here in just a moment. But I think these are good examples. Good is not due to those people in the sense of giving these kinds of things, because the truth of the matter is, if we were to help out in those situations, it really wouldn't be helping out.
Right.
Such a person, the sluggard, needs to get up and work. But, so, there are such cases where there are not those to whom it is owed. Verse 28, another do not follows up on that. We're talking about what neighbor is.
Do not say to your neighbor, go and come again tomorrow, I will give it, when you have it with you.
Do not say to your neighbor, come again tomorrow, I'll give it to you then, when you have it with you. Again, we need to establish the issue of why the command is given in the first place. What's our tendency? Selfishness, isn't it? This is mine, I have it, I worked for it. Okay, you worked for it.
Maybe it's
I want to use it how I want to use it. Which is not necessarily something I need, but something I want. But here's a person who is here with me, my neighbor. Who a neighbor is very important. We're going to talk about that. And this person has a need, a real, genuine need. Let's establish that, right? We're not talking about somebody who just wants $5 so they can go buy a can of, or some case of pop or something, or to go waste it, or do whatever with it. This is a genuine, real need. Okay? So, and you have the ability to help them. Cool. God has blessed you with that ability to help somebody. But your thought is, come back tomorrow. Well, I'll give it to you then. Deal with it later. Don't really feel like dealing with it now. And the command with regard to that temptation? No. Don't do that. But I don't do that. Why? Because we have the tendency to do it, don't we? We have a temptation to delay. Why do we have a temptation to delay? That's a good question, I think. The why question is almost always the most important question, though society would tell you it's not. Why?
Don't like them.
We don't like the person. Okay. Is that really a right response?
But I'm saying that's why.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
that is one reason why sometimes, isn't it? Because we really don't like the person.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the right way to react?
No.
No. Angie?
I was gonna say possibly giving yourself time to justify not doing it.
Trying to,
We're very
to give
good
your-
at justifying
Yes,
what we
to try to justify a reason why I shouldn't be helping this person.
Yeah.
So, the truth of the matter is that gets shot down, though. I mean, we think that way. And I'm not shooting down your answer. Your answer is right. But we think that way, but wait a minute, this is a real need we're talking about here. So what are we attempting to justify? Ultimately,
Our sin.
yeah,
Which we have a way to
give that man $1. Absolutely. He's right.
You really need
We're trying to justify our own sin, aren't we? Because what are we doing? We're acting out of, in that case, selfishness. We're acting out of indifference. Maybe we're being lazy and don't want to deal with it. Wow. Are we really that bad? In and of ourselves? Yeah, we
Yeah.
really are.
Yeah.
We can't lose sight of how messed up we are apart from the grace of God. That drives us to thankfulness. It drives us to worship when we realize that about ourselves. It also gives us a good reality check. It keeps us from reading these over and saying, yeah, that's what people ought to be doing. It makes us read it and say, this is what I need to be doing because I'm going to be like this, but for the grace of God.
Other people really should do that.
Yeah, other people really ought to be doing this. I mean, isn't that our first thought sometimes? We read this and yeah, this world is messed up and people need to be doing this and they need to be giving things to people who have needs. And yeah, people really, that's a command. People who have the ability to help others and they're not doing it and they need to be doing it. I need to be doing it. I have the sinful tendencies of selfishness, of indifference to people's needs.
That's why we say, come tomorrow. We hope they get it from somebody else.
So we don't have to be
Or they
inconvenienced.
don't come back.
Right.
Selfishness.
Or we're inconveniently home, not home.
Yeah.
Wait, not home yet.
Don't answer the door. You know who's coming. Yeah. But you see, to whom are we to render these things? Who are we supposed to be helping here? What is the noun? Do not say to whom?
Your neighbor.
Neighbor. Okay. Who's a neighbor? Let's find out. Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. Verses 25.
Never guessed that.
37. Oh, never would have guessed that. Luke chapter 10. This, Jesus gives us a really good definition of who a neighbor is. Which shouldn't surprise us because, Jesus kind of knows what he's talking about. There's a thought. But, Luke 24, I'm going to broaden out a little bit beyond some of the commentary there. But please note, as we read this, Jesus defines a neighbor here. He does not redefine a neighbor. He doesn't put a new twist on it. This is what neighbor really means. What it's always meant. And people then, in Solomon's time and now, try to get around the definition of it to justify themselves and doing their own selfish activities. We do this sometimes. So let's see what Jesus' definition is. And behold, a lawyer, someone who was an expert in the law, stood up to put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You've answered correctly. Do this and you will live. As a side caveat, Jesus isn't saying that you can earn eternal life by your own righteousness. Jesus knows good and well that you can't do this and live.
Right.
It's an impossible command, which is why we need grace. But that comes out kind of in the guy's response, doesn't it? Verse 29. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? In other words, I've done pretty well at this, Jesus. Pretty good here. Tell me who my neighbor is, I'll tell you exactly that. Yep, I've been that way to my neighbor. We're good to go. So Jesus throws him more than a bit of a curve. Jesus replied, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him, bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." So, not only does Jesus identify who the neighbor was, he says, who was a neighbor to that guy? Both ends of the neighbor issue here. Of course, he identifies a Samaritan, whom most, if not all, Jews really didn't care for at all. He says it was right what he did to take care of this person. He was the hero of the story. The Samaritan? Wait a minute. No, he's the good guy. He was being the neighbor. Yeah, he was. Be like the Samaritan. Jesus knows exactly where to push the buttons, doesn't he? He knows exactly where the sin is that needs to be dealt with. So if you think you've been doing this right, loving your neighbor as yourself, let me show you who really is a neighbor here. Not just pouring on oil and wine, but yeah, you need to be able to identify people who are actually doing it. Be a neighbor, this is what it means. So, the neighbor, of course, to the one who fell among thieves, what did he do? Instead of looking the other way when someone was genuinely in need, he took care of them. Yeah. 2 points to that story. So a neighbor is someone who's in need, who's in our lives, for however long. Right?
Anyone we come in contact with.
Anyone with whom we have contact.
Do you think it's necessary for it to be obvious that they're in need?
That's a good question. What do you mean by obvious? Something that's uncovered or something that's
This guy
blatant?
was laying in the ditch.
What? That's okay. That's very obvious.
It was obvious there.
Okay, he's...
Okay,
Okay.
a personal example, out on the street, a kid comes up and asks, get this, his cell phone's dead, he wants $1 to use the telephone. Now, you have to question that. I mean, you know.
Okay, I'm pretty sure payphones, if they still exist, don't have dollar slots on them. But
Right, that's what I mean, you know, and, you know.
now at the same time, do I have a cell phone? Sure. Am I with you? Yeah. Okay, I'll call. Do you need me to call somebody for you?
Yeah.
Stop and call someone for it. Does that meet the need? Sure it does. That'd be the right way to respond.
And if that's what he actually wants, he should be okay with it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You see, here it is. And I really think a situation like that, does that fall underneath this? Sure it does. When you have the power to do it, when you have it with you, I have a phone with me, I can meet that need. Right? Be a great way to deal with it. Now, so,
David, we had a situation one time where we were going to church and this person called and they had a problem and they said, I called such and such, but they were on their way to church so they couldn't come help me.
perhaps a modern day example of this very parable that Jesus was telling.
Yeah.
And let's stop and think about that. Because the priest and the Levite, they were on their way to do the Lord's business, right? Sure they were. That's an implication, I think, that's in that particular story.
But they were told that this was Satan trying to keep them from going to church, so call somebody else.
Oh my.
Yeah. People find all kind of excuses, but I think, you know, as church members, we need to be careful
Oh sure.
that we don't put the ritual.
I mean, up front here, I'll say this, as a Sunday school teacher, and if it's my class you're late to because you were helping someone who had a genuine need, I'm going to say praise God. So take that excuse off if you're thinking about it, okay? But that's exactly how we ought to be acting. We ought to be doing the neighborly thing. If it messes up with our schedule or what our plan was, you know, God has a right to interrupt our plans.
It's like the healing on the Sabbath. I mean, the Pharisees are always getting after Jesus because he was healing on the Sabbath.
Right.
And they were missing the whole point, of
Pull your
course.
sheep out of the ditch, you know.
Sure.
God knows where you are. He knows why. If you're not at church, He knows why. And He's either good with the reason, and you're going to be okay with it, or He's not going to be good with the reason, and you're going to know it.
That's a good way to put that. Thank you, Brother James. So if you have it with you, do you have it with you to help somebody just because it doesn't fit into your schedule and that's why you're tempted not to do it? Yeah, you have it with you. So say that to yourself a few times this week, even today. I'll do the same. Maybe God will use that to motivate us to greater obedience and loving our neighbors. Love your neighbor as yourself. So ask the question, okay, would I want someone to stop what they were doing and help me if I really had a need, even if it was inconvenient for them? Yeah, if I really had a need, I would want them to do that for me. All right, then I should do it for them. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you have them do unto you. That latter one flows out of the first one. The golden rule is just a twist on the second greatest commandment. A good twist. Restating, how's that? Verse 29. Verse 29 says, do not plan evil against your neighbor who dwells trustingly beside you. Wow. So you have someone who's dwelling trustingly beside you. He's in a sense of peace, a sense of security. He hasn't done anything bad to you. He doesn't figure anything bad's going to come from you toward him. He's done what's right toward you. Good community kind of thing. Works in the church. Works with people that you go to bump into in the world. It says, do not plan evil against your neighbor. Wow, okay.
Use a scratch to open these tools.
Sure. It's like, why on earth would we plan evil against our neighbor when he hasn't done anything that would cause us to do so? Again, are we really that bad? Yeah, we really are. We need those kind of warnings. We're capable of all kinds of sin, but for the grace of God. It's like, I'm not like that, so why is this relevant to me if you could be like that? I could do that. God help us not be like that.
Could it also follow that if you're not giving him whatever he needs, you're doing harm to him?
Yeah.
Is it following from the next verse too?
Yeah. Given the context, I think that's appropriate. Doing evil doesn't have to be premeditated harm. It could be a lack of doing good.
Maybe the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's.
Excellent. Love your neighbor as yourself. 10th commandment's wrapped up in that. Absolutely.
Don't borrow his stuff and not take it back.
That would be the withholding good thing, right?
Yeah, and is that the thou shalt not steal?
Oh, yeah. Hey, there it is again. Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't steal. Don't lie to him.
Don't covet.
Don't covet. Don't kill him.
Don't murder, yeah.
Don't kill him. Don't hate him.
That got to come in the next verse.
Yeah. But you see, a great example of this, I like it, as provided in the notes. 1 Kings 21, we're not going to go there for time issues, but Jezebel's conspiracy against Naboth. You may recall Ahab, Naboth, his neighbor, he had a vineyard, he liked it. Hey, give me your vineyard for a price, I'll do it, I'll take it, I want it to add to myself. And Naboth says, no, it's my family's inheritance, I'm not selling it to you. Naboth was right to refuse the king because of what has been established in the Old Testament. Family inheritance stays with the family, that's what it's supposed to be. There was a big discussion about that in Deuteronomy over a particular family, among other things, that was important in the nation of Israel for that to be the case. So Ahab gets all pouty and goes and curls up and starts sucking his thumb on his bed and starts whining about it. And Jezebel shows up like, what's your problem? He's like, he won't give me the vineyard. Whiny Ahab. And really, that's how I have to see it. He was just whining about it. And Jezebel says, I have a plan. Here's what we'll do. We'll have a feast. We'll put Naboth at the head of the table, and we'll get false witnesses to come in and say that he cursed God and the king, and then we'll take him out and stake him. Which they did. Had Naboth done anything to them? He'd been a good neighbor to him, apparently. Yet, they killed him. Don't kill your friends. It's kind of a bad thing, you know. Don't murder. Came back on their heads. Everybody remember Jehu? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Jehu, God anoints him through Elisha, and one of the prophets actually sent from Elisha, to be king over Israel. Jehu rides into town, kills the king. Jezebel's still alive. Looks up and she does herself all really pretty, like I suppose, and kind of taunts him. He's like, what are you doing, you murderer? He doesn't even respond to her. He shouts up, who's with me? A couple of guys look out. Throw her down. Throw her out the window. Cool, there she's dead. So they go have a feast, and they go bury her. Nothing left, just thorns. Dogs ate her. Which is prophecy from Elijah. fulfilled. Yeah, God brought it back on her head. God has a way of doing justice like that. He does not leave wickedness unpunished.
Yeah.
It doesn't look that way sometimes, but He always does what is right. The Judge of all the earth will do right. Now, do not contend with a man for no reason, verse 30, when he has done you no harm. It builds from verse 29. Don't plan evil. Let's say it again. Do not contend with a man for no reason. Contend, kind of a legal situation, if you will. I can't help but think of the United States as a whole when it comes to this. We are a very litigious society. Is that the right word, litigious? Lawsuit happy, if you will. We want to sue everybody. Litigious? Is that right?
Yes,
So we'll go back. Litigious. Thank you. Do not for no reason when he's done you no harm. How do we understand what no reason is? If he really hasn't done you any harm, I mean, really? You don't have any reason to pick a fight, yeah. You don't go to court with him. Don't take him to court. Don't sue him. Frivolous litigation is prohibited here. Of course, if there really is a legal issue that needs to be dealt with, an injustice that's not getting corrected, all right, then we can take someone to court. Mind you, not in the church. That's explicitly prohibited in 1 Corinthians.
Right.
We have an unbeliever who is doing wickedness to us, and it's appropriate for us to use the justice system to correct it. That's why it's there. But malicious use of the legal system just to bring somebody down and to try to get something out of someone that you're not entitled to, there's a right way to use the term entitled, then that's wrong. That's wicked. Explicitly prohibited here. Yes,
Yeah.
don't mean harm, don't.
I have a question.
Yes.
A lot of our lawsuits arise from accidents. So if you're accidentally harmed, it's truly an accident. Okay, you're entitled to, fair justice, your medical bills and maybe loss of wages. But they add on that pain and suffering and
How do you quantify that?
and the lawyers always try to get as many people involved and as much money as possible. That's not right, is it?
To a point, it's not. I mean, there are issues where laws come into play. It's like, okay, even if it was an accident, then you're responsible, you're liable to pay damages up to X, Y, or Z. Okay. I mean, example, when I was in high school, it was cold, we were off school that day, have this big dog, got out of the house, got into the street, and everything's iced over. So 110, 120 pound black lab. Big beast of a dog, our parents' dog. And apparently I was downstairs watching TV or something, and I see this dog run down the stairs, and my brother frantic follows her, and it's like, the dog, is he okay? I'm like, what happened? Oh, there's blood on the carpet, what's going on? What happened was that the dog got into the street, and this car coming down our street, probably 25 miles an hour, can't stop because of the iced roads, hits the dog, knocks the dog 10 feet. Dog jumps up, runs inside the house. Car has $500 damage. It's like, oh, God builds it better than Chevy, I suppose, but still, I mean, a short time later, my stepdad comes home, and the police show up. Because the call, it's like, hey, there's a lot of what's going on here. And the cop is there, and he's talking to my stepdad, and my response for my stepdad earned me a lot of respect for him at that point. He said, well, yeah, I'll pay it, I'm liable. I'm at fault. Why was he at fault? Because property was our dog that ran out into the street. And he wasn't even there!
Yeah.
But he was still responsible, and he took that responsibility. It was good and right for him to do that. But funny thing, we both have the same insurance company, and they just kind of laughed about it. It was all taken care of, but so that see, it's appropriate for reparations to be made because of responsibility. The law said this, therefore we went along with it. Now, if the guy had gone beyond that and said, no, it's irritation or suffering or whatever, and tried to sue us for thousands, even millions of dollars, that's beyond justice. There's a point where it gets cut off. Because when it goes into that, oftentimes people are just trying to milk it to get money out of selfishness. And you see, we're supposed to do good to those to whom it is owed. But I think we can begin to see how that would be appropriate. Yeah, beyond the cause, that sort of thing. It's a touchy situation, I suppose, because the truth is, I don't know enough of the law to tell you when that cutoff is. At the same time, one would wonder how just some of the laws are. But that's beyond the scope of my knowledge, and probably even we can talk about for the moment. But now we move on. Having said all those things, all right, don't do this to your neighbor, don't contend. Don't withhold good. Now we have a summary statement in verse 31, which is only half of a sentence in my translation, but it is a summary statement. Someone read 31 for me, please.
Do not envy the oppressor and choose none of his ways.
Do not envy the oppressor. A man of violence. Do not choose any of his ways. None of them. Man of violence. What is a man of violence? Not just somebody who's going to beat upon somebody else or someone who's going to go kill somebody else. It's not the idea. It goes beyond that. What is it?
Somebody who does any of the above.
Yeah? That's why it's a summary statement. Man of violence. It functions like this. The word means violence or wrongdoing. It refers to physical violence. Sure, we got that, right? It refers to social injustice. It refers to harsh treatment. It refers to wild, ruthless injury, hatred, words or physical. General rudeness is wrapped up in this. This is a big, all-encompassing term, which is why it's a summary statement. Like everything I just talked about, Solomon says, don't envy this kind of person who is doing this wickedness. Don't do it. In fact, I'm going to emphasize it even more. He says, do not choose any of his ways. Not just a few. You'll be tempted to be like him in some ways. You're going to try to justify it because it looks like he's getting somewhere with it. Solomon says, absolutely not. Don't do it at all. Absolute prohibition. No. It is not the way of righteousness. It is the way of wickedness. That man of violence is not for you.
My Bible says oppressor, which, is kind of, that's everything.
Right. I think the reason why it was translated that way is for that reason, to try to broaden it out a bit.
Right.
Yeah, it is because that is in English a more all-encompassing term because you can impress people in a lot of different ways.
Right.
Sure.
And violence people tend to think it's an action, physical action.
Yeah, I mean you can
But
certainly
oppressor.
oppress someone physically,
Right.
and you can also oppress them socially. You can
Mentally, emotionally, yeah.
with the law, there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do not choose it. Well thought out choice. You need to avoid those kinds of things. Think about it. Think about your choice. Think about it when you're tempted to pursue whatever way this is. Don't do it. Cry out to God for help to resist such temptation, because it's going to come. Again, we wouldn't have the command if it weren't a temptation. It wouldn't be in the scriptures if it weren't something that doesn't touch us in some way.
David, at our office, we have a supervisor who is an oppressor. And now there's an opening for another supervisor because one left. And one of the gentlemen in our office is like, I want that job and I'm going to be just like Richard. Okay, Richard's the oppressor who everybody stays away from him because he's mean and he doesn't work with them. But this guy is thinking more money, I'm going to be like him. He's wanting the ways of the oppressor.
Tell them the story of Solomon's son.
Yeah.
Rehoboam, right?
Right.
Get the advice of the older, wiser guys, get the advice of the kids that you grew up with playing video games kind of thing. Like, okay, who am I going to listen to? We know who we listen to. Look what happened.
Exactly.
Is that a threat? No, it's a caution, because people aren't going to like you if you're the oppressor. But, anyway.
Oppressors have a tendency to throw them.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. Here's the answer, begins the answer to the question, why? Verse 32 starts answering why. Why shouldn't I be like this oppressor, this man of violence? Why should I avoid his ways? Why should I listen to all these do nots you've been telling me, Solomon? Or to go along the sun motif, why should I pay attention to what you said, Dad? Why? Here's part of the reason. Verses 32 to 35 flesh out lots of reason. First of all, the chief reason. And an antithetical parallelism, putting opposites against each other. Someone read that for me, please.
The crooked man is an abomination to the Lord, but he is intimate with the upright.
But the crooked man, or the devious person, restate who this oppressor is. He's devious, he's crooked, he's evil. Is a what?
That's just perverse.
Yeah, another good way to put that. Again, these English translations are trying to grab onto this very complicated term that they're trying to render it. To give us the idea, the not right guy, yeah, it's just not a good thing. But he's a what? An abomination. That ought to catch our attention. This is not just, kind of an annoyance or a nuisance. Hebrew, toiva, abomination. What is an abomination? Talking about bad moral conduct? Sure. Something that brings God an eternal revulsion? Okay, we're getting closer. How about this? I like what John MacArthur says about it. An abomination is an attitude or act that is incompatible with God's nature and it is intolerable to Him, leading to His anger and judgment. Wow. Incompatible with God's nature. Doesn't work. Oil and water, it will not mix. What are some examples of abomination? Proverbs gives us a few. And this is one that we can see out of Proverbs 16 to 19.
Lying lips.
Feet that run swift to mischief.
Those are two of them. You're going to say them all before I even get there, aren't you? Proverbs 6, verses 16 to 19. We can pick up on that a little bit. Yeah. What does he give us?
Innocent blood.
Mm-hmm. This is another kind of parallelism. It's the x and x plus 1 that I was talking to you about once. This is probably the chief example of it. There are 6 things that the Lord hates. 7 that are abomination to Him. Things that are completely incompatible with God's character. I thought you said 6. Now you're saying 7. Yeah, it's meant for emphasis. In other words, get this. These are important. Know this. Haughty eyes, proud eyes. Lying tongue. Hands that shed innocent blood. By that we don't mean that we're not talking theologically with regard to depravity. In that sense, there is no innocent blood. But people that are being condemned, put to death unjustly.
Right.
And there's 60 million dead on the hands of this nation since 1973 from one act alone. You think World War II was bad? Going beyond that. Hitler has 6 million on his. We got 10 times as many on ours. Perspective. A heart that devises wicked plans. Thinking about doing evil, it's an abomination. Feet that make haste to run to evil. You are doing the evil. It's an abomination. False witness who breathes out lies, similar to a lying tongue. Except now we're talking about the court situation. One who sows discord among brothers. You're creating disruption unnecessarily among your brothers and sisters. It's an abomination. Homosexuality is called an abomination in Leviticus 18 and chapter 20. Toiva. Strong term. Not a small thing. Things we need to be taking seriously. This devious person who's doing this wickedness, this violence, this oppressor, is an abomination. The reason we're not supposed to be like it because it's completely contrary and incompatible with the nature of our God we profess to love and serve. But the upright are in His confidence. That's better. Putting confidence in God's confidence in opposition to abomination. So abomination really bad, in His confidence really, really good. What is His confidence? This strong contrast plays out this way. God's confidence, being in His confidence, the guarantee, it's protection, it's success, it's eternal life, fullest dimensions of this. It's beautiful. It's peace. It's hope. It's contentment. It's joy. It's God's favor. Yeah.
Isn't confidence also sharing something with someone? You're in my confidence. I've told you something.
Yes, my Bible uses the word intimate. He's intimate with the upright.
Okay.
So it's a closeness as opposed
A closeness and association, not so much as in sharing a secret with somebody, as in that kind of trust. I don't think. I think that's a different use
Well,
of
not
the term.
necessarily a secret, just that you share
My
things.
version says, His private counsel is with the upright.
The intimate knowledge idea is present. It's an intimacy that God has with the person.
It's a secret counsel.
Yeah, mine says secret too.
The closeness is the idea. The intimate knowing. The term know is used in Scripture in those kind of ways. That's the same kind of a concept. It's the intimacy, the fellowship, the deep fellowship that the person has that involves God's favor, His watch care, His protection, and that kind of a relationship with Him. So,
Wasn't it like Jesus said that He's like, you were slaves, but now I let you know what I'm doing? Is that kind of,
Yeah.
now you're
related to
Now
it.
you call,
Related to
now I
it.
call you a friend.
The modern evangelical church uses the term being in relationship with God and having a personal relationship kind of idea. And there is truth to that. It's that kind of loving, intimate, I hesitate to use the term friendship, but that's partially correct. The relationship that we have with God that is a saving relationship with God. Maybe I'll just put it that way. That's the idea that is being put forward.
Well, if you compare the context of completely removed from God, he's intolerant of it.
As
The
opposed to
opposite
the
would
right.
be close to him.
Yep. That's why parallelism is important. We know what abomination is, and this confidence is the opposite of that. That helps our interpretation and understanding. Something that's absolutely, completely incompatible with God, but this confidence is completely harmonious and compatible with the character part. So, like, oh, this is good. God's wrath is upon the abomination, his love, his shalom, his peace upon that, which is his confidence. The whole thing wrapped up in that term. Again, Hebrew can be a hard language to translate, as you're seeing because of all the variances in our Bibles.
Right.
The English isn't nearly as broad as Hebrew with regard to some of these words. Greek is the same way. But that's why we have footnotes. It's like this word means helpful. Now, verse 33.
The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the dwelling of the righteous.
A further why. Why? Don't be like this a violent oppressor, because God's curse is on him. He speaks his curse over him. But opposite, he blesses the dwelling of the righteous. Curse is opposite of blessing. Righteous opposite of wicked. There is our parallelism yet again. So God's curse, he rejects them. He delivers them over to evil and destruction in some way, shape, or form. Please note that this is an all-encompassing statement. House of the wicked, house and dwelling, that's actually the same kind of an idea. What is the house of somebody or something?
All that they do.
All that they do, all that they are, everything they have. All-encompassing. Their health, their family, whatever security they claim to have, their life, their estate. God brings it down. His curse is over it. On the other hand, on the righteous, he blesses. Again, don't just see it in terms of material things, though those sometimes do come, but the blessing fills with God's goodness on the head of the righteous in ways that the wicked will never understand. But ultimately, we overcome our enemies, those who are in God's favor. It's a good and beautiful thing.
The Women in Action had a thing a couple of years ago. They passed out these little bookmarks that said "fully satisfied," and that's what we get with Christ. We're fully satisfied. You know, we are content with whatever He has when we have that relationship. Not that we don't want things, but it's not that we have to have them or we feel incomplete or we need. You're satisfied with what God has given you at that time.
Jeremiah 2.
And there's a peace. There's a peace that goes with that.
It's a beautiful, wonderful piece.
Yeah.
Excellent. A little bit of poetic justice here. Verse 4. For the scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. James 4, 1 Peter 5, quote this out of the Septuagint, talking about the need for humility that we have. He gives favor to the humble, graciousness to the humble. He opposes the proud. Scorners he is scornful. So those who scorn, who tear people down with their mouths, bring them down with their words. We've already talked about the fact that God speaks his curse over them. He scorns them. Like, okay, so you're going to do your wickedness and use your words to shred people. Well, guess what's coming to you? I'll shred you with mine. God's words are bigger, a little more effective, a lot more destructive. With a word, he spoke the universe into existence. I love how the Bible talks about that. I was watching a video on YouTube by Jason Lyle. He used to work with Answers in Genesis, now works with the Institute for Creation Research. And he was talking about the stars and the variances in the stars and what kind of star our sun is. And you have our sun, and you have a bigger star, and you have a bigger star, and you have a bigger star, and all the ones out there, and all the galaxies, and the billions upon trillions of stars and galaxies that exist in this vast universe that we have. And how does God describe how he made it? Genesis? And he made the stars also. That's all we get. Drop in the bucket for our God. He said, let there be, and there it was. Wow. God's word is powerful and effective. And it accomplishes what he wants.
Also, isn't there a sense here of God getting the last laugh?
In a way.
So my Bible uses the word scoff.
Yes, I'm sure. The humble. Gives humble, or gives grace to the humble, the Septuagint. He gives favor to the humble. Who are the humble? People who are economically distressed, sure. Needy neighbors, people who get exploited by others, who get mocked. Again, the scornful idea. Ever fall into that category? A little bit, maybe a long time. Sure, been there. But we don't need to worry about those kinds of things. Our God gives favor to the humble who are his. Yeah. That's our hope. The God who spoke the universe into existence is putting his favor on us. I don't really think to worry about. But I can't see it. That's okay. He does. And he's taking care of it. Peace comes from that. It is easy to say, which is why we have to keep saying it to ourselves. We need to remember. And we trust. The wise will inherit honor, but fools get disgrace. Which is the last of the reasons. Again, antithetical parallels. Wise as opposed to fools, honor as opposed to disgrace. The wise inherit it. An inheritance is a permanent share in a possession. This is what we inherit from our God. So it's a guaranteed inheritance. The stock market is not going to crash and somehow illuminate all the coffers that God has stored up and then we don't get anything like happens sometimes. No, he gives honor. It's an inheritance that the wise, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We inherit from him these things. We get this possession. Disgrace is dishonor. They don't get anything. Looks like they do in this world sometimes, oftentimes. Writers of Scripture, again, thought about this. Read through the Psalms. See how many times, why do the wicked prosper? Why do they have long lives? Why are their stomachs full? Why this? But then you ended up, like in Psalm 37, as an example, of what the real end of the wicked is. Looks like this now, not going to be eventually. So don't envy them. Don't want what they want. Don't be like them. Continue to trust in God, for he does give honor to his own. They will inherit it. Guaranteed. Not mine. His word's better than mine. You got a comment?
Yeah, in my Bible there's the wise inherit, the fools display, so it's actually something that fools are doing on their own, whereas the inheriting the honor is passive. So it's kind of like, kind of the default. People
There is a little bit of a difference
display
there.
their dishonor.
There is a little bit of a difference there between the term inherit and inherit. They're getting the disgrace for themselves. It's not something that they're inheriting from God. It's something that they're getting because of their own foolishness, you could say. There is a little bit of a difference, but I was just emphasizing the emphasis.
I don't know if this display is they put up their dishonor. They're proud of it. They're showing it. Whereas
Often is the case.
you get honor. It's from God, and it's nothing.
Which is a cool thing, really. Because I don't have to work to get honor for God who's secured it all for me because of the work on the cross. Death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ has taken care of any and everything that I could ever need. And has guaranteed God's favor toward me. So I can relax. Not be lazy, but rest in peace. Real peace, that shalom, that well-being, that joy, that contentment comes to me because of God.